Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We are lucky enough to have a really cool conversation today with Fred Sitkins, who is the Executive Director for the Inland Seas Education Association. And Fred, I'm going to let you explain this because I want to start by saying this is a floating classroom that I don't think gets near enough publicity. It is one of the coolest things we have interviewed since we've done this show. I know the inside of it because one of our former junior sailing instructors, Audrey Whitaker, is on your boat. And we saw you. I've seen your boat 100 times in the last couple of years going up and down Lake St. Clair and Lake Huron. So I'm going to shut up and let you explain what it is, the Inland Seas Education Association, this floating classroom, and maybe give us a quick synopsis, and then we'll get into the real nitty gritty about what you do.
Yeah, thanks. So appreciate you having me on, Greg. This will be fun. So the Inland Seas Education Association, we've been doing this work for 34 years now. And the idea with us is that we're hoping to inspire the next generation of Great Lakes stewards. And the way we do that is by using this unique floating classroom, something that has that power, natural power to inspire and get kids, provide a good, solid, memorable experience and a positive association with the lakes. We kind of believe in Jacques Cousteau's theory, people protect what they love. And so our first job is to help them kind of love and cherish this resource. And then, of course, we provide the knowledge and information about the Great Lakes ecosystem and what lives there and how does it function and what can they do to be active stewards of these incredible resources that we find. So we do that by bringing folks out on a unique tall ship schooners. We operate a few of these boats. We have our flagship vessel, the schooner Inland Seas, which is the one you run into all the time. We're down in Detroit quite a bit now. It's a 77-foot gaff rig tall ship schooner. And we lease the schooner Manitou up in Traverse City during our busy part of the season. And we have just purchased a new schooner that's primarily going to support this work that we're doing in Detroit. That's a 105-foot three-masted schooner Alliance. So anyway, we use these unique floating classrooms, and we have students participate as a Great Lakes scientist, Great Lakes researchers. We put them in the role of a scientist. They deploy real high-tech science equipment, and they sample all parts of the lake so that they have live samples to explore in our laboratories that are on board. So students then, once we gather all the samples, have the chance to kind of learn about all the unique creatures that live and thrive in our Great Lakes. So in essence, that's what we do. We try to inspire students to care, and we try to really point folks in the direction of STEM related careers in the hope that, they can have a good, long lasting impact on the health of our Great Lakes.
Is biology the center core of what basically you're working with in terms of education?
Yep, biology, but we do a lot of, engineering type things as well. We do work with our underwater robotics, so a lot of our ROV stuff, and just we try to inspire any of the STEM arenas, but certainly science, biology, engineering are probably the centerpiece of most of our programs.
Okay, I want to get into the specifics, but I want to take you back a little bit. Tom Kelly, your original founder, who I think has passed in 2016. You're the executive director. Am I correct on that?
That's correct, yeah.
Tom got this idea back in 89, and by 94, this sort of wonderful thing matriculated into what you have now. What was it about him, and what is his legacy? Maybe put it that way.
Yeah, Tom was a fisheries biologist, and he kind of, really had the understanding that this incredible resource we have in our backyard, so few people understand it. And they look at the surface beauty. This is, they're iconic, and people love to boat and fish. And that's about the extent of the knowledge of Michiganders with our Great Lakes. And he thought that was something that needed to change, and really kind of did a lot of research on how do you do this environmental education thing. And in order to have the strongest impact in environmental education, you've got to really have an immersive experience where students are engaged in material, not sitting back and learning, but they're active participants in the learning process, the discovery process. And so, there was a really unique, or there is a unique program that kind of spawned all of these ship-based environmental programs. It's the Clearwater out of the Hudson River. And so Tom went there and volunteered for several months to learn kind of the ropes and understand how we could apply a similar concept on the Great Lakes. So that's how the idea was developed. And of course, it's just kind of snowballed through there. We started with this one, school ship program, and now we do just a really wide variety of things that just kind of all sprung from that original concept.
If you look down your website, the dossier of what programs you offer is amazing. From fishes, from various kind of going out for 2 hour, a lot of 2-hour cruises. You also have dormitories, so you have. I'm assuming you have overnight programs as part of that process.
Yeah, we do overnight programs both in our facility and on board the ship. There's a good broad range of experiences, and the idea is that we want to reach students in as many ways as we can, and we'd like to have multiple experiences. This idea of environmental stewardship is a continuum. It happens over multiple exposures. And so we want to provide that broad range where we could do a 2-hour sales with school groups. We work with about 140 schools throughout the state of Michigan who come and attend our school ship programs. And those are anywhere from 2 to 4 hours at a time. And then during the summer, we travel the lakes, which is how you've run into us. And we provide the same type of programming and communities around the lakes. But what's unique is when we're traveling, say our home base is in Suttons Bay, when we travel from Suttons Bay to Detroit, we're going to have a group of students on board for that trip. And we'll stretch that out to a 4-day journey where they're on board living and functioning as scientists and members of our crew, and have that just super impactful experience. There's nothing like a student from Detroit who wakes up on their second day on board in the middle of Lake Huron, and that's when we have the opportunity to really talk to them about their horizon. Look at how broad and wide their future really is, and endless opportunities, and you just have a different way to reach kids when you have them in a position like that. And the reason we have dormitories here is because we want to reach as many, kind of students who have never had an experience like that before. And so when we're working with students from Detroit and we bring them up here to Traverse City, and they are able to engage not only in our programs on the water, but in programs in our local watersheds, and then they get to stay. Our dormitory space is as cool as our boat, I have to tell you. Everything we do is under that philosophy of providing this unique, memorable experience. So kids think they're sleeping on a boat when they're in these dorms.
Fred started the organization. Obviously, he had a science background. Is it lost on anybody that a former Boyne City principal, an educator, is running an education program?
Well, I think it's really important. We have to make a difference. It's not just this fun boat ride. We need to be able to provide value to the schools that we work with, and have an impact on kids. So I think it really is important. Not only am I a past educator and building principal, but we have multiple staff members and volunteers who are former teachers as well. So yeah, we've got to provide value to the schools and the students that we work with.
I think it's important for people to understand that educators are so important in the process of children and young adults growing. It's a special skill that you just don't have if you don't have education in that background. We talked briefly. I said I'm a coach, but I'm great at coaching, but I would be terrible in a classroom because I understand how effective teachers are. I certainly we pull from them and learn from them, but I think that's part of that discussion. I think that's kind of important. In terms of logistics, are you as much in Lake Michigan as you are in Lake Huron or Lake Erie?
Yeah, well, because we're home base is Traverse City and Suttons Bay, we spend more time in Lake Michigan than any of the other lakes. But as far as the organization's strategic goals, our strategic goals are really the Detroit region, because again, we're focused on providing these opportunities to underserved students, underserved populations. And, I'm from downriver Detroit area. There's a real passion for me about that region and access to the waters. That was something that really, you know, impacted me as a young kid growing up on the Detroit River, and just the lack of access. I've always been drawn to the water, but it's different. And so being able to provide this opportunity for students down in the Detroit region is really important to me and to the organization. And so most of our growth priorities are focused in expanding on the Detroit River.
Fred, you grew up in Wyandotte, which is, if you think about all of the auto industry's dumping grounds, did that have an effect on you as a kid looking from Wyandotte, knowing what it meant? Now you're working in terms of environmental science?
Oh, it had a tremendous impact. Like I said, it's just one of those things. I think everybody's drawn to water, but boy, those are my memories. Really just hunger to get into a river, or, a small tributary, or the Detroit River, and just knowing that I couldn't. And my mom in particular was so adamant, stay out of the water. You just can't go there. And it wasn't until I moved away from Detroit that I learned about the Great Lakes and really understood, that was a unique kind of situation in Detroit because of what you talked about, and knowing that that's not everywhere. And so again, that's a big part of why I'm here with Inland Seas, is knowing that sometimes we have to get kids out of that environment to get that connection, to understand this resource. And then, it's just as important to provide that access in Detroit as it is to provide it elsewhere. So you can kind of see the connections.
No, and it's an amazing, when I was maybe fourth or fifth grader, I remember we lived right by the Rouge River in Garden City, going through Hines Park. And I remember seeing a picture on the front of Time magazine where the Rouge River would burst into flames. Spontaneous combustion it wasn't a joke. This river had gotten so polluted. And now there's trout fishing in the Rouge River. So we do have, and I get my point going back to the earth does have a way of fixing itself like we do with our own bodies and things. And your education premise is exactly what we're talking about, is being able to provide that secret, or that trick of whatever it's going to be to make it better.
Yeah. And you know what, Greg, I think that's a really good point. I think we've made so much progress over these last couple of decades, and I attribute that to so many different environmental organizations and other areas that are really creating. We've got so many wonderful trails and opportunities for folks to get out in the woods and engage with nature, and it's developing that passion, that love that we talk about, and I think that's what drives this kind of change. And so it's a really good time that we're living in. I think about this generation of students that we're working with, and oh my goodness, they get shortchanged, I think, just because of technology. But this is an extremely caring, competent, conscientious generation of youth that we're raising. And I think the horizon's really bright, because you're right. Earth can heal itself. It just needs time, and it needs people not, reversing the process.
From your travels, what do you see are maybe two or three major issues that need to be sort of direct? I'm sure the DNR and other organizations are working with the lakes to make sure they're in good shape. But what do you see as a critical issue in the Great Lakes as you study it with your I want to call it a traveling circus. I think it is, because it's such a cool thing to be on that boat, to be able to see all that you're doing. But what do you worry about as far as the lakes and the condition?
It really is primarily invasive species are the biggest threat that the lakes face, and that have caused the most dramatic change as of late. And so, that's a constant issue. Again, I think we've made progress on that over the last decade with a lot of the the kind of the discharge rules that have come to fruition. But there's a tipping point, and right now, an example that I would give up in our region is the impact of the round goby. it's just been incredible what that has done to the fish population. We used to have just a really vibrant, diverse fish population in this region, and once the round goby came in, it disturbed the feeder fish population to such an extent that round gobies are the predominant fish, which of course is not a desirable fish. Now, there are some things, as you said, the environment kind of changes. And so now we're realizing that the lake trout, for example, are rebounding because of the round goby, because now all of a sudden they've got a food source that they haven't had before. Once they figure out they can eat these things, that the lake trout population increases. But there are a lot of our other kind of fish species that are suffering as a result of that. And of course, everybody's aware of the impact of the zebra mussels and now the quagga mussels are having on our lakes. And so when it comes to dramatic impact and difference, I think invasive species certainly top the list of concerns. And of course, all of the other environmental discharge kind of things that are occurring. Obviously, Lake Erie has kind of the biggest poster child of what happens when we provide too many nutrients into the lakes, and those are really large problems that are going to take time to fix and a lot of communication. And but yeah, nutrient runoff would be the next number two threat that I worry about.
Inland Seas Education Association. Why not Inland Lakes Education Association? You got to explain that one to me. Are we seas or are we lakes? Because it's called the Great Lakes.
Yeah, yep. It's called the Great Lakes, and a lot of people I like the idea of referring to them as our inland seas because it helps to communicate the vastness of it. The biggest thing we realize when we have visitors in our region is people don't get the scope of the size of these lakes until they see them. And so when we've got people here in Traverse City looking out over the sand dunes, looking out across Lake Michigan, that's when it finally hits. Wow, these aren't just regular lakes that we're thinking about. These are much larger. And so that's the concept. But actually, Greg, I will tell you that inspiration came from our founder, Tom Kelly, who was, as I mentioned, a fisheries biologist. And so he worked at the University of Michigan, and the research vessel that University of Michigan had at that time was called the Inland Seas. And so that stuck with Tom, and that's why he ended up naming his organization after that vessel. And of course, our flagship is named as well, Inland Seas. So University of Michigan helped with that too.
Okay. That's fine. I'm a Spartan, but we'll go with that. That's not a problem. I would be remiss to not mention that there's a lot of programs around the state, several, 5 or 6 that are one in Milwaukee that are very similar to your programs that spawned off of what you guys have done. So it's a very vital interest in obviously what education of kids. So is that flattering when you get to see programs in Bay City and Milwaukee and other places around the state?
Yeah, it really is. This work is really important. And so it's important that we reach as many students as possible with these types of experiences and this types of information. And so, yeah, the ability to help spawn other organizations that are doing similar work is very flattering, and certainly helps us understand that our mission is being executed at the highest level possible.
Let me talk briefly on the cost. If I'm an educator, or if I'm a parent, or if I'm a student, give me an idea of your fee scale so that we have an understanding of what it is that we might be involved in.
Yeah, it's the most confusing thing that we do because we want to make sure every student has the opportunity to have this experience. And so I'll tell you that the basic cost for a class of students to have a 4-hour experience with us is $825.
Okay.
However,
unlimited number. How many kids is that?
So depending on the boat, it's going to be a regular classroom of 30 kids.
Okay.
Easy.
Okay.
We can get 35 out on Inland Seas as a max. When we have Alliance, it'll be 45 students that we could have on board.
Okay.
We raise a lot of funds for scholarship support. And so when we, as I mentioned a couple times, our strategic priorities are on underserved populations. And so if we've got students from Detroit that want to make that trip it's more often than not going to cost the school anything to be able to have this experience, other than the transportation that it would take to get to the boat.
Right. Okay. If I have a 12-year-old at home and I want to go out, there's classes that are available, right?
Yeah, so during the summer we do in our in between times we do public programming, and we'll sell tickets for that for families to come out. So those are kind of scattered throughout the summer. We're not doing that currently in Detroit. All of our programs are prearranged with classrooms there, but in the coming years, once Alliance is fully operational, we'll be offering public programs down there as well, in between classrooms.
Well, it should be important to point out that little Bobby wants to go out today. He can't take a 77-foot boat out by himself. Plus, the charter fee on that, it's a couple of grand, and I get that part. But it's affordable if kids are interested. Is that a fair?
You betcha, for sure. Yeah, our public sales, there's going to be a $30 ticket for adults, $25 for kids, and they're going to have a very memorable, fun experience. And yeah.
The 4-day camp, what is in ballpark again? Where dollar wise, where are you with that?
Yeah, for those 4-day experiences, basically it's $100 a day,
Okay.
for those students. So yeah, it'd be a $400 experience.
That's cheap.
Yeah. Yep. We don't want cost to be a burden. We're a nonprofit organization, and most of our fundraising is geared towards providing these direct experiences. And so it's all to offset the cost and make it so it's not a hindrance.
I don't want to get into the specifics, but are you a 6-figure nonprofit or a 7-figure nonprofit?
Yeah, we've been just over $1 million here for the last 3 years, as an operating budget.
And growing, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we've been experiencing a pretty rapid growth curve.
You also put a new boat in the water, I think, in January, or at least commissioned one?
Well, we purchased the Schooner Alliance out of Yorktown, Virginia in January. We are still working on a couple things in the shipyard, new bottom paint, zincs, all the things we need for the transit. And the only issue that we've had with Alliance is there's no holding tank capacity. And because we're doing these longer trips, Inland Seas has 800 gallons of holding tank capacity. As a commercial vessel, we can't discharge anything. So all of our sink water, everything gets collected. Alliance has 96 gallons,
Okay.
because it's operating in the ocean. So we're converting some freshwater tanks to holding tanks. And that process is just like any project right now, is taking a lot longer than we wanted. So we anticipate we're going to have Alliance here in the Great Lakes in July. We'll get underway in the next week, hopefully.
Okay. I'm looking through your information. I found something interesting. You have a breakdown in terms of, on your mission statement, you have a breakdown of K through 12 students, 57%, general audience 14%, and so on and so forth. Teachers are only on it for 2%. My question, would it make sense to have, especially, in the summertime, have more teachers on to spread the gospel more, or is that a dumb thought?
No, it's not a dumb thought. So our teacher work, that 2% represents professional development that we do. So we do a real in-depth professional development for teachers around the state. Basically, we do that in cohorts of 30 teachers at a time, and we work with them for an entire year, helping them to develop stewardship action projects in the communities that they live and work. And so it's a real in-depth experience, and it limits our numbers because of the depth. The other reason that you saw those percentages called out is one of the challenges that organizations like us face across the country is you've got these amazing boats that everybody wants to get out and sail on. And so we would have no problem booking that boat every day of the summer for weddings and any
Right.
kind of events that you might think of,
Yep.
because people want to get out on a fancy boat like that. And so it's oftentimes the pitfall for an organization. You chase the easy money, right? Like it's a lot easier for me to get that charter income because somebody is, as you said, going to pay us a couple $1,000s for an event like that, and all we're going to get from a school is maybe $200, $500, $800. But it's our mission. And so we're clear. We set out these goals that we're going to establish and make sure that we're working with K through 12, our principal audience, the majority of our time. And so we hold ourselves to those standards so that we're not doing things unrelated to our intended mission.
Fred, when you see all these kids come off the boat, what is it that makes your, as an educator, what is it that makes your heart happy watching those kids go walk off the boat with those smiles? Is that it?
Oh my God, the smiles are amazing and the experiences. And, we, as a principal, you didn't get kids talking too much about what they learned. But boy, I'll tell you what, when the kids come off this boat, they're talking about what they learned and experienced, and it sticks with them. It is a wonderful, you get students in classrooms in their best. And, I'll tell you, Greg, one of the things I was thinking about this yesterday, we're working with middle schoolers yesterday, and, they're worried about being cool. And so the majority of their time at the beginning is spent pretty much in a shell, because you can just tell they're looking at their peers and they don't want to respond to strongly one way or the other, because they might not be looking as cool as they wish they were. But boy, I'll tell you what, halfway through these trips, once those sales go up and they've all helped to do that, it's just like those masks come off and kids are able to be themselves and have fun. And that to me is what's the most powerful part about our work. You get to see these kids transform out of their shells and get excited, and it's just not cool to be excited about learning, and somehow we break through that.
My assistant coach he's a physics teacher. He takes his kids to Cedar Point, and now Cedar Point is sold out with the physics. You're trying to teach a kid who doesn't understand physics, but then he's looking at a ride or he's looking at some contraption at Cedar Point. They now have waiting lists at Cedar Point because somebody got the great idea 10 years ago to use all of the formats and formulas that you could figure out there. And now he says, I get more done in one day than I do in a month in the classroom, because now it's a practical issue. And obviously there are visual learners and there are auditory learners, but for the visual learners, it's a really good experience for the kids, which is the same that you have.
I was a pain in the neck as a student. And the reason I was primarily was I just wanted that purpose. I was always the kid that said, why do I need to know this? I never got an answer to that question. And it frustrated me. Kids need that context. They need a purpose for what they're doing. And once that's there and understood, everything else flows after that,
Yeah. You're primarily involved in this. Your staff is it a 12-month deal or is it an 8-month deal? Because obviously you don't do anything in the winter, or maybe you do.
We do. Yep. We work 12 months. Everybody's the majority of our staff are year-round employees, other than our crew on board the ships. But even our captains are year-round, of course, because of the maintenance. But yeah, we do programming throughout the winter. Again, that's where we exercise our dorms a lot, is having students come up here, and we'll provide 3-day experiences for students that, get to use our facility as a home port. And then we get them out. It's kind of fun things. We do some unique ROV work in the wintertime and be able to launch those things under the ice and have kids see what the lakes are like under the ice. And then we've got a lot of really wonderful wetlands, accessible wetlands in our region. So getting kids out in a frozen wetland and have the chance to explore an area where you otherwise can't get to besides the winter is kind of, it's fun, unique experience. And so that's some of the stuff we do throughout the off season.
Last question. One of the NASA guys recently said that we know more about space than we do about our own oceans. In terms of exploration, we're going to Saturn, yet we can't find our way to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. When Cousteau was here back in the 80s, it was the same kind of conversation about Lake Superior. You had no idea just how diverse the landscape was. And this is, Jacques Cousteau talking with the whole deal. My question to you is, do we understand as much as we need to understand about the Great Lakes?
Oh, of course not. No, they're vast. It's an important ecosystem that, we're learning a lot. And there are lots of wonderful people working on behalf of our Great Lakes, and both, internationally. The Canadians are doing just as much as we are. So we're gaining an understanding, but hey, this is science, right? Science takes time, and you're always going to be learning.
I lived in California a long time, and I think that if you look at the high desert water, they have water districts. So water becomes power more than anything else, because you can't build development without water. We've had a resurgence with all the snow to fill up the Colorado and a few places out back west. But we look at the Great Lakes, and you see the beach, but sometimes you got to look under the covers a little bit to see what's there and not just recognize it, which is I think what you guys are doing. And this has been a really cool interview. Yeah, no, this has been a really cool interview, and I appreciate the time. And maybe if you're down in the Detroit area, we can step on board and sort of do a visual from that standpoint.
I sure hope so. We'll be docked down there at the Milliken Marina is where we execute our programs from. We'll be down there the beginning of August and the beginning of September. We'll be there for about 3 weeks, 2 weeks in August, but we'll have a week on either end, as I mentioned, traveling with students. And then in September, we'll be down there for 2 weeks too. So yeah, you see the big ship with the red sails, come down and pay a visit. Well,
Fred, I will appreciate the time. You one of your interns this summer is probably one of the nicest young ladies you'll ever meet in your life. And if that is the kind of folk you hire, you have a staff that you got to smile because they're terrific. And Audrey,
we have an amazing staff, tremendous culture in this organization. I love it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, thank you for your time. Hopefully our paths will cross this summer, and best of luck and enjoy the good weather.
Thanks, Greg. Yep. You too.
Hi, welcome back. We're talking with Bayview Commodore Paul Hulsey. We're sitting along the Detroit River. We're going to talk a little bit about the BOD coming up this weekend. We're still going to talk about the Mackinac. We haven't had those conversations yet. We're kind of back for the second part of the fourth season. So let's start with the BOD. BOD's this weekend, and how many entries? And talk a little bit about it.
The Bayview One Design Regatta. We used to years ago take part in the nude events that travel around the country. And we realized it's been probably 10 or 12 years ago that we could do this on our own. So we created the Bayview One Design Regatta. We'll have probably 130 entries, well over 2,000 competitors and guests. So it's our second biggest event next to the Mackinac race.
It is also, I think, the third biggest event in the Midwest. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. I would think
participants.
Between the Chicago Mackinac, the Port Huron Mackinac, the Verve, and then the BOD, you're probably correct. We're in there.
Okay, big argument this year: ORC versus PHRF. What's being used for scoring for the BOD?
So the BOD, we went to ORC. So as most of the people who are in this area know, we moved to ORC for the Mackinac race, we used to manage perf on a local level, and because of the lack of volunteers, we ended up 2 years ago pushing perf to Midwest perf, which I believe is run out of the Illinois, Wisconsin area. I don't think that you're going to see one play a significant role, meaning take over. I see a combination of both. The larger boats that sail the point-to-points or the long-distance race, I think in the next few years you're going to see most of them move over to the ORC rating. But there's still going to be a home for perf with a lot of the smaller boats who may not want to shell out $1,000 for an ORCI rating. So that's the way I see that blend. But we, as a club, we decided early on all of our events this year will be ORC. We are as a club pushing away from perf.
Okay. Well, obviously, it's a one-day race, a very successful race coming up this weekend. We'll hopefully have some footage of it, some aerial footage of it, as well as to maybe talk to some of the winners for next week's show. But let's talk obviously about the big one coming up, the 99th Mackinac race,
That's right.
The Mac, sponsored by Bayview. It's obviously one of the best and biggest races around North America, certainly. Mm-hmm. How many entrants at this point when you've got into the race?
I didn't look this morning, but we're probably pushing 240, 250. Not back to the 300 levels we saw back in the 80s and the early 90s, but we're getting there, and we're certainly hoping for that for next year.
Do you see the pandemic fading quickly in the distance in the way things are operating? Because obviously the marina up at Mackinac Island is going to be full this year. You're going to do some things that you haven't had to do in the past. Do you feel like you're back full time?
I feel like we're back, and for your viewers, we never quit. When most regattas took a year off during COVID, we kept this race going, and we were one of the only ones in the country. And I think because of that, we haven't seen some of the drop-off that you've seen in some of the other significant races around the country. But I would imagine I'm going to hope for 300 next year, and we're back firing all cylinders.
When you've got 99, you've got that centennial, regatta looking in the mirror. You guys have been planning for a while. Is there anything different in 99 that you're planning for the 100th, or is that sort of information that's still not been generated to the public?
We've been keeping it close to the vest, but I'll give you a couple things that we're looking at. We are in talks with some PR companies that are putting together some film during this year's Mackinac for releasing a hour-and-a-half spot that we hope to air at one of our local channels, let's say this time next year. So it's almost like how on cable you'll see where you follow like a Formula One team. We're going to do something similar and pick, let's pick some of the TP52 teams. We'll pick a team from there all the way down to maybe a boat that typically finishes last as the pickle boat, and let's develop some characters and tell the story that way. So we're working on that right now. We're looking for some sponsors to obviously help us finance that. It's not a cheap endeavor, but it's looking good right now.
There's an interesting story at Makatawa. There's a guy that's with a 52, Eric Wenstra, who is using his 52 as a beer racing league as boat.
Yeah, I know Eric real well.
He keeps it, and keeps it at the same dock he had his other boat, and he's campaigning it with his family like it's a J111.
Right.
And he obviously has to step up. It's an older TP52, but the way he's handling it, it's not quite like the Syndicate. But they're very, very competitive in a lot of those races, and it's kind of cool to see that boat used in that format.
Yeah, I've known Eric for a long time, and I when he bought the boat, I was like, wow, he doesn't know what he's in for. Well, obviously he does, and he's moving around the course well with those guys. So I secretly root for him every time they go up.
All right, so we are about 6 weeks away, 6.5 weeks away from the Mac race.
Yep.
Where are you right now as the Commodore? What is your role? And I guess what's occupying most of your time for us to don't know what becomes a full-time job before a couple months before the race?
Yeah, anyone who sat in this chair, it's a 30-hour-a-week job, and if you've got a family and your own business, man, it's a lot. There's a lot on. I will say that right now, the perception out there is that Bayview makes money off this Mackinac race. The reality is the entry fees only pay for about a third of the cost of this event, and we work year-round to attract sponsors to make up the difference. And the goal is to break even. So we're out there looking for at least $150,000-$200,000 in sponsorship, and so that portion of it is probably the largest portion. As far as logistics on the race, we have a separate committee that's separate from the Bayview Yacht Club board, called the Mackinac Race Authority. There's 9 individuals that it's a full-time job year-round, and they set up every portion of this race. So we're signing checks probably starting in January of the previous year for the current race.
If you had a chance to ask the question of other Mac Commodores, I'll ask of you as a sort of a thread from the last couple of years. What's the hardest part of being the Commodore for a race like this?
Oh, a couple different things come to mind. I'm currently not a boat owner. I just sold my boat, I think, today. But trying to put together your program and still kind of run the operations of Bayview, when you get to the island, you're full on. And even before, you're doing interviews, you're working with, our partner, Port Huron Yacht Club, Tyson Conley. Thank God we're good buddies, and it seems to be pretty seamless this year. But, the week before and the week after the race, you're just running. It's a full-time job.
The best part?
The best part? For me, the best part is my father was Commodore here back in the early 80s, and I always... to honor him, I decided to take this on. Probably not at the best time. I have a young family. I have 2, children at 10 years or younger. I have, my own business that I'm running. I could have waited, probably another 10 or 15 years and it would have been much easier. But my dad's health was failing, so I decided to take it on so that he could see me in the uniform, and he did. He ended up passing 2 years ago, so. It was for me it was more of a sentimental thing.
Right.
But I can tell you though that the years leading up to it are pretty tough. Even though I'm really busy right now, I'm just having a ball with it. It's just a great time.
Talk a little bit about sponsors. Who's involved this year with the race at the Mac race?
Sure. Some of I won't go through because we have like 15 sponsors, but I'm going to go through some of the biggest ones. So the top right now is the Mackinac Race Foundation. So few people know that there is a 501c3 that was set up years ago that would allow the Mackinac race to run in perpetuity. Even if Bayview Yacht Club burned to the ground, the race would still continue. So they put forth a lot of money to make this happen. So and they have a fundraiser on June 22nd, a cruise around Lake St. Clair, and there's still tickets available. So if anyone wants to go for a ride and get a great meal and make a donation, give me a call and we'll set you up. We also have returning this year, we have Fago, who is a local company that's been a partner with us for the past 4 or 5 years, and they're wonderful. Aperol is a big one. A new sponsor this year, Long Drink. And let me think, Shepler's is returning. They've been with us for many years. And a couple others, a couple that I can't talk about right now because we're actually inking the deal this week. But I'll give you a little, well, I'll just tell you. Grand Wagoneer is 99%. We're going to have my Grand Wagoneer, I think, is the show car, but we're going to have it on the island at Port Huron Yacht Club and perhaps at Bayview. So there are a few others that Microcode is a new sponsor. I'd like to mention them. And I know I'm forgetting. Oh, Tito's. Of course, Tito's would be back.
Is there anything new this year?
What's that?
Anything new this year?
Anything new for the race this year? There's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that we're working with in respect to the NOR. We're trying to work out some of the little small hiccups that were unforeseen. Like last year when we didn't have a finish mark and there was one incident that complicated things. So there's a lot of us tweaking the NOR and the SIs to get this right for the 100th. And there's some hiccups along the way, but thank God we've got a great relationship between the board and the MRA. I think we're going to work everything out.
Was there any difficulty with paperwork going from PHRF to ORC, or was it seamless?
Well, I think, and Dobbs Davis would be the first one to tell you, 2 years ago they had a staffing issue, and when we converted over to ORC, I didn't get my rating until midnight before the race.
Okay.
Dobbs came down here for an ORC seminar earlier this year. I picked him up at the airport. He promised me, he's like, Paul, there'll be no problems. And so far, knock on wood, we haven't had any issues with people wanting to switch over to ORC. A couple, because we have a regatta pretty early in the season, a big regatta, the BOD,
Right.
starting in 2 days. I've had one person say, hey, I need help. Other than that, it's been pretty smooth.
There have been some issues with PHRF getting things done, and that's why they switched out. But it's good that they've obviously worked, for the most part, worked out most of those issues.
Right.
When do you take a breath? I guess when you're up on the island, you see the first boat come across the finish line.
Well, I'm actually I raced last year and I'm racing this year.
What are you racing? Who are you racing with?
So this year I'm racing with Commodore Chuck Storms, who was the overall winner on the long course last year.
Okay.
And I was the overall winner on the shore course. I sold my boat, so we decided to join forces. So I'm going to be on the shore course with Chuck. Smaller boat, but one of the faster ones on the shore course. So I'm praying that we finish on Sunday because I got a lot going on Monday.
What boat are you in?
It's a Italia, and I'll mess this up because it's always in meters, but it's a 34-foot Italia design called Detour.
Okay. Have you thought at all, and I guess this is really my last question, have you thought at all about the size of the race, the fact that it's been around 100 years, and if you think back 100 years ago to what the history of this has happened since obviously back at the turn of the last century, does the history, when you walk through the halls here and you see all the Commodore's pictures with guys who look old in the pictures, and some of them were probably in their 30s, they looked old even then. Does the deja vu part of the history ever come to you as Commodore? Is it something you let yourself think about, or is it just, it's kind of there?
Every day when I walk through that new entrance at Bayview with all the trophies for the Mackinac race, obviously, but specifically when I go into that boardroom, and if you haven't been in the Bayview boardroom, a picture of every past Commodore is on the wall, and I look at them every time I hold a meeting, and there's a lot of weight on your shoulders and big shoes to fill, and I'm reminded of that every time I walk into that boardroom.
With young children, do they know that you're the Commodore at Bayview, because Grandpa was?
They have been running around terrorizing the staff here, and I'm like, hey, we got 7 months left of this, guys, and you're going to have to start acting right. They love it. I bring them down at least 3 times a week, and they love this place.
Is there entry still open for the MAC? Am I correct?
Absolutely.
And so that you can find that information online. we will put up the cruise coming up in, I think,
Yeah,
in
June 22nd. I think we're down near Great Lakes Yacht Club is where they pick up. It's on the Infinity. So real large boat that they cater a great meal. And
We'll put that information in line. If you're still interested in the race, you can still be part of that. You can register now put that information up.
yeah, just either go on to Bayview's website or just call down to Bayview. And Jennifer, our office manager, she'll be happy to help you out.
Okay. Well, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Craig.
Welcome back. We're talking with our famous wanderer, the great looper, Nagy Mata. You're standing in the Half Moon Bay outside in Hudson River in about 70 miles north of New York. You're at the marina that's behind me, or someplace in that marina, with a good look at the Adirondacks in the background. And I guess, first of all, how are you? We haven't talked in about 2 months.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. Up the East Coast, the Intercoastal, had some really cool passages, very scenic. We also had a couple of rough passages. There was a spot where I had to go on the outside from Manasquan, New Jersey, up to New York City, basically, and had to do that on the outside. There's no intercoastal there, and that was a rough ride. I gotta admit, it took a lot of control of the boat, and it was couldn't use autopilot at all for those 4 or 5 hours. So it was a long ride, and the waves were very steep, or about 4 or 5 feet. But they were not breaking. They were more kind of big swells and ocean swells type.
Rollers.
That's a good way of putting it. And I'm still learning about this boat. And this boat, because it has a flat bottom, does not like beam seas at all.
Right.
So you kind of end up tacking downwind, so to speak, with the boat to get the best ride you can.
You're obviously you bought that boat for this trip, and we all know that. But here's the question: what is that boat primarily designed for? Is it for weekending? Is it for fishing? What is it? What is its purpose?
Well, the original design of the boat was designed and originally built in Canada, and it was intended for the Canadian fisheries and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Okay.
It was designed with that, and then the manufacturer decided to make a recreational version of it. So it's a very sturdy boat. It's the other thing that's really unique about this boat is it's trailable. So it's got all the comforts of home. It's got the refrigerator, the air conditioning, the bow thruster, and a trailer. So what a lot of Rossboro owners do is they take their boats all over. They take them to anywhere from Maine to Pacific Northwest, Bahamas. Well, they don't trail it to the Bahamas, but you know what I mean. So anyway, that's the beauty of this boat.
All right. I've had a chance to interview a number of naval architects, and I know nothing about naval architecture, but here's my question. Flat bottom, V bottom. Why would you have a flat bottom boat? And what's the difference between that and a V bottom? I'm sure there's a very simple answer, but I'm not apparently smart enough to know the difference.
Again, the boat was designed, to my knowledge, is designed for shallow draft.
Okay.
So that you can go places, you can trailer it very easily. It's got very low, but at the same time, the design is very, very seaworthy. I'm really impressed by how this boat handled the different conditions. As they always say, the boat can take a lot more than the skipper, and that sure is true in this case. That's for sure.
I think the boat can take more than the skipper, because usually it's fear that grips you, right? No, is that not accurate?
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, it's not comfortable to be riding in 4-foot rollers. The boat was perfectly safe, but it's just not comfortable.
I think of sailing, and all of a sudden there'll be a puff or something will come up that will get outside your comfort zone, and you know what to do, but it doesn't change your anxiety. It doesn't change your adrenaline that runs. It just it comes with maybe being, and again, maybe fear is probably the wrong word, but certainly apprehension is that, because you're not sure if the boat's going to go over. It never does.
Exactly.
And you steer in the right way. But as that boat starts to heel or go in a direction that you don't want it to go because of inclement weather, your heart your heart comes up into your throat. I think that's true of most people that aren't necessarily maybe ocean going racers. I think that's pretty accurate.
Today, the excitement was a little bit different. Coming out of New York, there's so much ferry traffic, and those guys don't slow down. They create an amazing amount of wake. There's commercial traffic, there's police boats, and there's these mega yachts that again they just put the throttle down, and so and you have to be constantly aware of what's going on around you because they're not stopping, they're not changing course. It's
Well,
up to you to watch out for them.
they're on schedules. You're not. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's fair. Absolutely. Plus, they have a bigger boat, so that makes a lot of difference as well.
No, I get that part. Let me look over my shoulder here. If you look past this boat right, I'm looking in the wrong direction, but see the big size boat right there on the end?
Yep.
Come up and down that, probably cost $8 million to fill the gas tank,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have the problem with the ferries that you typically have. Anyway, the last time we talked, you were down in North Carolina. We talked a little bit about the Outer Banks, and you're coming up the ICW, and you've enjoyed those things. I want to start right in New York because I think coming into the Hudson River and coming into New York with the lights and all the rest of it, just to describe that, because that's got to be just an absolute thrill.
It was a thrill. It was so I spent a night before entering New York. I stayed at a Great Kills Yacht Club, and it was a great stop. It was very nice. It reminded me a lot of Crescent, actually. The same kind of ambiance, the same kind of people that we started, same guys complaining about work hours and just the same thing exactly like Crescent. It was awesome, actually. I felt right at home. And but they were great. They were great people, and it's mostly power boats. There's a few sailors there, but the atmosphere is just like Crescent. So I spent a couple of nights there, and then I came up. Great Kills is on Staten Island.
Okay.
And so I came up under the bridge, Verrazano Bridge, is it? And just into the New York Harbor, and that's when all the traffic started. But it was quite a sight to see Lady Liberty and the Ellis Island. Very cool, very cool.
Now you're coming up. We talked a little bit about this before, that you were looking forward to being able to. There's a designated area by the Statue of Liberty where you can actually park.
You can anchor there.
Anchor your boat. So talk about that. What exactly is that? Talk about that.
There's a section behind the statue where you're allowed to anchor, but there's also a lot of exclusion sections where you can't get near enough to it. I did not anchor there. I went to a marina close by. It was called Liberty Landing. Very nice marina. Again, it has New York prices. The price tag was almost twice as expensive as any other marina I stayed at on the Loop so far.
How much a foot?
It was $7 a foot.
$7 a foot. Wow.
Yes.
That's expensive.
$7.
We're talking $2.
It is expensive. I'm sorry?
We're talking about $2 around here being expensive.
I think average on the Loop, I think about $2.50. I've had places where I paid less than $1 a foot, and most places around Florida were maybe $2.50 to $4, somewhere in that range, depending on the city. But these guys charge $7 a foot, and they get away with it. And it's really cool, area. You're right across from the Statue of Liberty, or right next to the Statue of Liberty. You're right across from the World Trade Center. It's quite a picture at night with all the lights from New York. So you figure, I'm going to only do this maybe once or twice in my life, be on the Loop. So might as well just it's worth it. There's
an old adage: if you get a chance to play Pebble Beach, the golf course in California, Monterey.
Exactly.
The cost of the green fees is immaterial. If you get a chance to play it, you play it because you're going to play it once in your life, and it's just one of those things. So it could be $6, it could be $6 million. It doesn't really matter. I get that.
You got it. It's the same thing exactly. That's a good way to look at it.
We've talked to a lot of people who spend time on boats in that part of the world, and they talk about the security. And I think you were just mentioning earlier that lots of helicopters and harbor police and those kinds of. You feel pretty safe in that area with all the protection that was available, or at least what was visible?
Oh yeah, I didn't. Yeah, there's actually not just New York City, but there's hardly any spots on the loop where I really did not feel safe at all. Even whether it's in Anchorage or whether it's a free dock downtown someplace, everybody complains about the Joliet Wall. Joliet has a free wall, Joliet, Illinois, and it's kind of in a seedy part of town, and sometimes you get some difficult situations at night. But I've never experienced that. I've never had any issues. Not a problem at all.
Joliet, home of the Blues Brothers.
There you go.
Some reference. So how long does it take you to get, if you were just coming through early in the morning, how long does it take you to get through essentially what is retail New York through the East River and however else you'd go? How long does it take?
Oh, it doesn't. It's not very long at all. Maybe, I mean, the whole stretch could be 10 miles, maybe.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if you're going slow, it could be an hour and a half or so.
You think in that 10 miles, there's probably something in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 million people live in that 10-mile stretch.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
And
Yes.
you realize how, obviously high rises, but you realize how jam-packed that part of the world is, which is maybe why they get $7 a foot for a mooring.
And some of the big boats there, Greg, it's just unbelievable. Some of the luxury boats they have there. I mean, there's money over there. There's definitely big money over there.
So you're saying they're boats bigger than yours that you saw in New York City?
Let me rephrase that. There's hardly any boats that I ever saw in the loop that are smaller than mine.
Right. A couple of them probably had cranes that are big enough to think of yours. Yours is a dinghy.
Absolutely. Did I tell you the story about Fort Pierce?
No.
They put me on the mega dock, and I don't know why, but I get all these boats that are, there was an 80-footer right across from me. There was a 65-footer the other side, and these boats had captains, and one boat had a chef, and a crew, and here I am pulling up my little 25-footer, but they're all nice people. I mean, honestly, even when I stayed there, the one couple on the 80-foot boat, they invited me on board, and guess what? They had a piano on board. Literally a piano on their boat.
Well, don't you have one on yours?
No.
I carry a trombone, but I get your point. No, I get you. It's one of the I can't remember, but there was one of the financiers from New York, and I can't he came to the Detroit Yacht Club. They had about they had a 200-footer. And on the back veranda, we had a chance to walk on the back veranda, and there was artwork on the back of the boat that was worth something in the neighborhood of $500,000 because there was a replica of a Picasso, but there was also an original Matisse, and that was paid, and it was all in glass and all the rest of it, and all the wicker furniture, and it was a beautiful place, but it was one of those things that it's a different lifestyle than what you and I'm happy to have a 45-inch TV on my boat, and I think that's glorious, but that's not. I get your point. So you're now in an area, if you can see the picture behind me, that you're starting to get into the mountains. You're starting to really get into some really pretty country. You're about 10 miles from West Point, going up the Hudson. And you mentioned that you were talking about coming back to Erie Canal, but there's a problem with a bridge, and now you've got to figure out which way to get home.
Yeah, I just learned about this yesterday. There's a bridge on the on Erie Canal, and it's a 10-foot clearance, okay, which not too many boats can go underneath that. But there's a mechanical problem, and these bridges are pretty old, so they had to fabricate some of the repair parts. So the last estimate I heard was it could take up to 3 weeks. So what that means is there's a lot of loopers that are kind of clogging up the pipeline, so to speak. They're waiting and they're treading water some different places. So the decision I need to make is, am I going to wait for 3 weeks or more, or am I going to take a different route? And there's a couple other different routes. One route is to take the Erie Canal. Instead of making a right turn heading up to Lake Ontario, I could take it all the way to Lake Erie and skip Canada. Or I can go up Lake Champlain, end up on the St. Lawrence, and just come down from Montreal and which would add time to the trip, basically.
Having lived in Lake Placid and Ticonderoga, which is where the fort is, coming up Lake Champlain, Lake George into Lake Champlain. We lived on the north end of Lake George, and then eventually ended up chance to live Lake Champlain. Plattsburgh to the New York side, and Burlington, Vermont to the east. It is the most beautiful piece of property you could ever imagine. You've got the Adirondacks to the west. You've got the Vermont mountain range to the right. It is absolutely, Mount Mansfield is the most spectacular place you could imagine, especially in the summertime. And it's interesting because Burlington is to Plattsburgh much like Traverse City is to Alpena. Burlington is a very, very much Vermont community, and Plattsburgh is obviously on Lake Champlain, but it's much more industrialized in terms of what it might be. And it's interesting when they run the car across, it's almost like a different world across there. Just south of Burlington is Middlebury College, which is a very private, wonderful place to go to school. Just almost like two different worlds. But if you have a chance to go north, God, go Lake Champlain, because it is absolutely breathtaking. And it's some of the most beautiful country you'll ever see in your life.
I'm probably going to have to make that decision in the next few days. By the time I get to maybe Albany, or just a little bit north of Albany, to which way I'm going to go.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to go. So you're looking at coming back, I'm guessing, end of July, first part of August. Does that sound about right?
That's about right. Yes. Yeah.
All right. We're not that far away. Obviously, Memorial Day weekend is coming up. June 1st is just around the corner. You've had this adventure now for what, 8 or 9 months?
No, actually, I left in July, so it'll be, by the time I finish, it'll be 12, maybe 13 months.
Okay. Has the idea of closure, or in this case, finishing, caught up with you yet? And the emotion of that closure caught up with you, knowing, all right, what's next? You come back to town, you come by Crescent, you wave, you go to the dock, wherever you're going to put your boat. At some point, you have to come back to a regular life. Is that entered into your head yet?
Oh yeah, and it's really kind of a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, I can see the finish line, and like that old horse, I'm just kind of rush. I want to rush home. I can see the finish line. I want to head to the barn, so to speak. On the other hand, I have to get my life back in order. I gotta, little things like the car. The car is the battery's dead. I gotta get that fixed. There's a ton of things, mundane things that are kind of in the queue, so to speak, and I just need to catch up on some of those.
Let's wipe away for the everyday stuff, for cars and places to live and those things. That's all. Obviously, you got to deal with all that. I understand that.
Yeah.
Have you thought about the next step? What is that going to be? You're obviously retired, so that's part of that, makes that a little bit easier. You've done this great adventure, and almost anything you do at this point is going to pale in comparison. It'd have to.
Okay. What you're asking me is kind of interesting because since I retired, I've always felt that I had something to keep me engaged, something different, so to speak. I did several things. The loop is the last one of them, the most recent one of them, and granted, it's the most adventurous of the list. But yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out what that next step is, and part of me wants to do it again. Maybe not right away. Maybe wait a few years, and hopefully Anne Marie will join me on this. Not hopefully, we will. We are starting to talk about that, and we need to get a bigger boat and all that. But
we should point out that Anne Marie is your better half. All right, I'm going to treat this just like we would have normally treated it. We got kind of messed up with Wi-Fi. We were talking about the choices of this great adventure, and not talking about where you're going to live and the mundane things of where the car's going to get oiled and those kind of things, what you're going to do. But I would think the emotional downturn, the emotional, what do I want to say? Just the emotion of not doing it anymore and being on this great adventure, it's got to be a letdown. And so my question is, have you allowed yourself to think about what the next step is, whatever that might be?
There's definitely going to be another adventure, okay? And very likely it's going to be a second loop down the road a little bit. And I'm already talking with Anne Marie, and we're starting to plan a loop down the, maybe a few years from now. But it'll be an awesome trip. Probably need a little bit bigger boat for two people, more bigger than this one, but it would be quite the adventure to do that again.
Okay. So between now and then, and I'm really trying to get in between your ears.
I know you are.
Is there a part of you that lays awake at night going, damn, there's only a month left or only a few weeks left? Is that even entered in your mind?
Not as much as I expected.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Certainly not as much as I expected. Between the family and I'm looking forward to actually getting home and settling down for a little bit, actually.
I asked that question because the last ski run of every year, I always put in my head that this may be the last time I ever ski because I don't know what's going to happen until the next time it snows. So I try to I try to make a ski run when I'm on my last sail for the summer or for the fall. I know I'm going to I want to make it to be the best. I want it to be a 10-knot breeze with the sun going down because I don't know if I'm coming back to the boat. Then that's sort of that finality of what I let myself think that way. So I can look forward to what's coming next. Does that make sense to you?
Look, there's really a couple of things to look forward to. One is another adventure. Yes. And a part of me wants to do that again, like I said. But I'm also looking forward to the normal life, so to speak. Getting up in the morning and checking the mail and just going to see the kids and the grandkids, all the ordinary things that we take for granted that I haven't had in the last year or so. So part of me is excited about that. So I'm going to do a little bit of that for a while. But yes, there's another big adventure down the road for me someplace, and it's probably very likely going to be another loop with Anne-Marie. I've ran into at least two couples on the loop that had to stop their loop because of a serious illness or injury. Okay. And it was quite disappointing. And they feel the same way, that the same sense that you're talking about is, look, live life now. Don't postpone. Go after your dreams. And then, you know what? And when it's over, find another dream.
I keep having a conversation with somebody close to me who wants to sort of take 6 months off and go lay on a beach. And I said, you've known me. I'll be 69 in a couple of weeks. And I said, you've known me since I'm 12. When have you ever noticed me to take a week off or a day off to go lay on the beach, let alone 6 months? You want to lay on the beach, there better be a golf course, a marina, and a ski hill, within earshot of the facility, right? So, and I asked that question because I think when you take these great adventures, you're kind of falling off the cliff because you've spent all this time, and now what's next? And sane people usually figure it out, and you're not necessarily sane because you do the things you want to do. And I admire you for that. I think it's terrific.
No, I appreciate it. But right now, I am definitely going to have a second adventure someplace doing something. But at the same time, I'm really excited about coming home and living a normal life, so to speak.
Okay, so then this is the last question. If you start to plan that, you mentioned your better half. Do you think, knowing the solitude of this trip, do you think it becomes a better trip with somebody that you have as a companion? Not only, a complete, and what am I trying to say? Just somebody that's with you to share that with you. It's got to even be more fun to think about the next adventure with somebody that you love.
Absolutely. I'm excited about that. I'm really looking forward to that. Doing it solo, just like sailing solo or sailing shorthanded, it's quite the challenge, and you challenge yourself, and that's a good thing. But it's definitely means a lot more to have somebody you care about with you, and to share the experiences and learn together and face the challenges together. I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. We will do it when you finally get back. We'll do a complete impression where you want to eat, where you liked it, and what all this. I see right behind your shoulder. Is that a fishing rod right behind you? I've got to make a fishing comment here. Is there a fishing rod right behind you?
I thought we talked about this in one of the.
No.
Yes, it is.
Here's my question: Is that fishing rod? Is that a fishing rod behind you?
Yes.
Okay. That fishing rod was above you.
It is
in the rafters, so it's obviously come out of the rafters since the last time we talked, and now it's against the wall. So have you used it?
I know. No, you gotta hate me for this, but I broke it. So,
No?
well, it's broken. So somehow I gotta either fix it or replace the whatever the spinner part, whatever it's called.
Right.
So you can tell I'm not really a serious fisherman.
Well, especially with knowing all the
But it's
lingo,
you know what?
right?
But there's fishing in Michigan. There's hope for me yet.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
Anyway,
when I'm in a wheelchair, it'll be pickleball, it'll be bowling, it'll be fishing, but we'll wait for the wheelchair. Anyway, have safe travels coming through the Adirondacks and which direction you go. We'll catch up with you probably another 3 or 4 or 5 weeks when you get into Lake Erie. And God, be
sounds like a
safe.
plan. I should be, yeah.
Be safe for sure, and we'll hopefully we'll see you in 6 to 8 weeks.
Thanks, Greg. Take care. Thanks for this.
All right, man.